So the next two talks will be presented by Josie and Michael, and so it's going to be how hard is it to bring a professional level sustainable advanced CMS to the market, as well as rethinking the web CMS and finding the excitement. These two talks are expected to be around 15 minutes each, and we will do a break just in the middle. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Hello. Bienvenue. I am Josie, my colleague Michael. We, along with our in-office and out-of-office team, make up Byte Studios. It's an interactive studio dedicated to libraries and public institutions.
And so when we create a project, we have a scope, of course, but we also immediately start thinking about what we don't want to do, and we create a manifesto around that. And that includes data rules, which basically, like, we want to see at any given time a visual of all the data, and any time that we can see a relationship. So using something like SQL Pro to edit, manage data. We want to be able to export it easily to switch databases entirely, whether we're using Postgres or MySQL. We like it to be pretty much equal. We want to do the database to be simple. We don't want to use stored procedures and forced relationships. We'll do that on the software side. We use denormalized data whenever we can versus extra tables, which turns out to be hard to do, but then it saves a lot of time and trouble. And ORMs are just too far. When we're talking about build rules, we make large projects. We want to make them as quickly and efficiently as possible. We've learned that SAS or less, something like a transcoded, in this case, script, we don't want to use that because it requires this process to do it. TypeScript, does it give us magical powers? It's cool, it's nice, but can we do it in JavaScript? No. Well, let's just go ahead and skip that. Test-driven development is another kind of area where we think for a smaller project, it's not really worth it. We want to test it in different ways. The whole idea of a build step, of running to npm run dev or whatever, we don't want to even do that. We can skip so many of these parts, but what it does mean is then we can use tools, frameworks, and the like that actually work with this system. And that part saves us a ton of time. And it causes problems, no doubt, but we found lots of good solutions to them. Functionality-wise, of course, just like any standard project, you want to have like cool new tech. You want to have the billing system set up right away, WebSockets, you can have live everything. And the reality is that's all coming. If this project takes off, we're probably going to rebuild the entire project, maybe even in a different language, as it grows in 2 or 3 years. So why do we want to imagine like trying to build and force all of this into the current? It's kind of like imagining this as a smaller project until the time it gets big. And that's just kind of part of the manifesto. We think about things like simply dark mode. Of course you have to have dark mode, or at least Ryan thinks so. And we love it. And then we have a builder mode and we have a super admin mode. And every time you do an interface change, you now have 2 times 2 times 2 ways that you have to test it against. And you multiply how many ever different modes you have. We try to think about that and try to keep things to a minimum. We kept dark mode. So the parts of a web application, I'm just going to start by explaining kind of probably what you already know if you're here. So I'm going to do it real quick. And then Josie's going to get into specifically how a content management system is built. Of course, you define the CI and CD. You basically want to make a system where you can do proofs of concept, you can do data backups, you can publish into a stream, you can back one up if something really falls apart. Of course, there's interfaces like what kind of front end do you want to use, what kind of component libraries, design systems. When you think about the application, you want to think at some point or another about things like z-indexing, what goes over what, because at some point you're going to find that didn't work out. And of course the data interfaces, GraphQL or REST, whatever you want to do with that. If we want to have other finessed parts to it, of course there's user accounts and all the things that go with that. And performance-wise, we want to know when things are going slow. We want to know when things are actually erroring, so we have a decent system for tracking all of that. Alas, a whole bunch of puzzle pieces we threw in the air just for fun, which Josie will explain.
As a content management system is thought of as similar to a web application, but there are quite a few things that actually set it apart. To run through some that we have, there's page management, where you can edit and view the page content and elements. Navigation management to understand hierarchical data. Digital asset manager, where you can upload and organize any files to your website. Buckets to view any content on any or all pages. Data sources to supply that data across the whole site. Themes for if you want to edit a color or a font just in a single click. Settings for small changes. Admin accounts to control who can edit or change or look at anything across the site. Search indexes to create context for searches. And dashboards and special tools to view information in an understandable and useful way. So it creates a clear image of what a content management system is.
And so for the content management we created, we started it in 2020. You'll see in the next talk why we bothered to do this and why we didn't just use Drupal or WordPress or whatever. The idea in 2020, we had some months off to think about what we wanted to achieve next, so we started thinking through kind of this whole process. At first, we were just really kind of creating proofs of concept. Would Twig be a good way to create a connection to, let's say, the data, all the information, architecture, schema, modeling, etc. 2021, we wanted to start importing live sites as quickly as possible. So we take some of our regular client sites, all libraries, import the data, and find a way to put real data on a real screen. If it's all fake data or lorem ipsum, it is going to be really hard to tell what works or how it works. And so we did that pretty early, creating, of course, the APIs. We should do internal documentation more. We sometimes fail. And then, of course, the branding and a build system. In 2022, we put our first production site live, so it took a couple of years to get to that point. We continued building site tools, an issues system, all the other fun things that you would imagine. And this is the start. We always knew this is going to be a closed and an open source product, so we wanted to have a standalone, which is the open source, and we wanted to build the first part and then start finding a way to have one code base that we can manage and use, and that exports to the standalone version, which becomes the open source version. In 2023, we put the website out. We came up with a series of functional testing. Since we don't do unit tests and things like that, we do want to have a decent way to test and a consistent way, so functional testing and interfaces for that became really worthwhile. Josie is going to be talking about the whole sign-up process as a case in point of one of these things. Last year, we put up a third and fourth site. We worked a lot more on documentation, new tools, and a big key thing is we found the export systems. Like if we want to export MySQL, that creates one amount of headache. If we want to take sites data and put them all into one and then be able to take any given site and pull it back out, there wasn't a data system that worked like that. So we ended up creating, yes, a 17th standard of grouped CSVs, or some, I don't know what the G stands for, but the idea of merging CSVs so that we can have hierarchical data, we can have relational data all built into the CSV, and any given part is still just basically a CSV. Lots of stuff to do next year, the open source this year. Oh no, it's this year. And more stuff to do next year. It's been a wild ride. So the sign-up is an easy part of the wild ride.
It's an important part of it because our librarians actually need to be able to make a website, make their configs, add administration accounts, create their sitemaps, load up their branch data, hours, choose a theme, on and on. The process itself, I mean, it took a month for like the original wireframing design process, and actually building the original outcome was a month. Testing and doing the sign up and API, creating that was 2 months. And actual testing and tuning of it was another month, plus all the scope expansion.
Sorry.
Inevitable. The sign-up itself, we start off simple with basic information. Information about the library, if they have multiple branches, put in that information, what their hours are. Library features, like if they want to add blogs, spaces, book lists, anything to their website. As well as global site tags for the actual to tag your content with across the site. Sitemap themes, we have 3 of them originally preset, but librarians can then go and reorder, rename, delete, add their own to make their own fully custom sitemap. And in the end, the library gets a website, they're happy, and we're happy as a result. As for how difficult.
And so the whole talk is about how difficult is it to do, so I guess time and people would be the way to think about it. It's easy to reinvent the wheel. It's also gives you some options, a lot of ways to redo things entirely. So the sign up, as we talked about, is 5 months. The digital asset manager, which is like a file manager that has a lot of digital asset manager material, is 6 months. And I should say this was one person and you that built it, so 5 months for one person in average. This was 2 people for 6 months. This is 3 of us, and it took a year just to come up with a really solid way to make the front end work and solve all the problems. Data editors, because there's so many, each one has a different layout, and we wanted to have a generalized system so that it's really easy to switch to spreadsheet mode or switch to data or tiles view, Kanban, whatever modes. 16 months. However, the real advantage of this is when you want to do something that's quick and that would be a lot of work in another system, something like a branch map, where we want to have a non-Google map because we're trying to eliminate Google from library sites, and have just a system where you point and click where the different branches are, that whole thing took less than a half a day, and it's usable in any data source. And so that we can keep adding new ideas that are all essentially plugins. And in the end, being able to fulfill any client requests. There are no limitations to the templating, the back end, because we control it. We will never, ever say, oh, well, the content management won't allow us to do that. Well, if we do, it would be our fault because it's our content management. It really lets experimentation be a big, solid idea. And I feel experimentation in content management is what we need next.
So, yeah, no denying making the content management system is difficult, but it's worth it in the end. So we persist.
Any question on the session? Yes. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, so sorry, what is your content management system called, and where do I find out more about it?
I didn't want to make this a sales pitch, so we kind of hit it. If you go to the Byte Dev FOSDEM, you'll learn a little bit more, but it's called Collata, C-O-L-L-A-T-A.